Carvana's so easy. Just a click and we've got ourselves a car. See?
So many cars. That's a click-tastic inventory.
And check out the financing options. Payments to fit our budget. I mean, that's
Clickonomics 101.
delivery to our door.
Just a hop, skip, and a click away.
And bought.
No better feeling than when everything just
Clicks.
Buy your car today on
Carvana.
Delivery fees may apply.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Welcome to IndoctriNation, a weekly conversation series about protecting yourself from systems of control. I'm your host, Rachel Bernstein.
Hello, everyone. Today, it is my pleasure to have my friend and colleague, Steve Hassan, on. In this episode, I talked to Steve for a personal and eye-opening conversation about how cults work, why people get drawn into them, and how those same dynamics show up in today's political and social landscape. Steve opens up about his own recruitment into the Moonies and the difficult process of leaving and how that experience shaped his decades of work helping people understand and break free from undue influence. We also explore the overlap between cult behavior and modern politics, including his research on what he describes as the cult of Trump, the title of his book on that subject, and his interactions with key figures and organizations along the way where he was collecting that data. We also dig into broader topics like fourth-generation psychological warfare, why certain groups are more vulnerable to manipulation, and what it actually takes to build resilience and critical thinking in a world full of persuasive forces. So, this episode offers what I think is a really grounded and compassionate look at the tactics used to control people and highlights why awareness and empathy and informed conversation matter so much, especially right now. Here's Steve. It is a total treat, my pleasure and honor to have Steve Hassan with me today. We go back a long way, and it is so nice. It's like old home week to be able to talk to you always. It feels good, nice and warm, lovely connections. I would love to have you introduce yourself, even though you really don't need to, but just in case, go for it, and then we'll start talking.
Yeah, my pleasure. And Rachel, you and I go back decades and decades, and you're one of my favorite people and cult experts. And I met your dad, and who set up the cult clinic and the task force in LA. And you went on to become a professional counselor and do the cult clinics. And so we go way back. So very briefly, if it's possible, any of your listeners don't know who I am. I am Steve Hassan, and I was recruited into the Moonies when I was a college student at age 19 and dropped out of school and was estranged from my family. I'm mentioning that, Rachel, because Oprah Winfrey just did a big podcast on estrangement and left out cults and undue influence by bad therapists. So I made a few videos on that, but I was estranged from my family. They didn't know who I was. I thought they were satanic. I had a near fatal van crash, reached out to my sister, and that led to a deprogramming that started involuntarily, became voluntary when I wanted to prove to my family I wasn't brainwashed and I wasn't in a cult. And thankfully, they taught me about Chinese communist brainwashing, and the lights started turning on, and I realized Moon wasn't the Messiah. He was not a trustworthy person. He was a liar, something I should have recognized if my mind hadn't been hacked. And then I cried and I was like, what the fuck? Pardon me if you don't like cursing.
Not a problem. That's okay.
I've been cursing on my podcast lately. It's just the culture. It's like, what the F?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and then I reached out to Lifton, who said, you know more than I know, because I studied it secondhand. And Lifton just passed away at age 99. And I've done a whole bunch of interviews with him. He was very important in my career, which is going on 50 years, Rachel. May of 2026 will be 50 since my deprogramming. So I have a master's degree in counseling, and I did another master's and a Ph.D. in organizational development and change, because about 10 years ago, I realized the law is about 100 years out of date with understanding undue influence. And I wanted to, with the encouragement of a professor at Harvard, he said, you need to do a quantitative study on your bite model and prove that it has scientific value if you want to influence the law. I said, I'm too old. I'm 63. And he said, well, I'm 77. Do you want to change the law or don't you? Because if you do a PhD, I'll supervise your research. And then I was like, oh boy, okay, let's see if my neurons are up to it. And I did the program. I got smarter. I'm living proof of neuroplasticity that your memory improves. Anyway, so that's my big task, other than having written The Cult of Trump 6 years ago. And it came out before the last election with a forward by George Conway saying, yep, the GOP is a cult now. And then afterward by myself, the book's still in print and I read it. And now we're seeing the devastation. The world is realizing, yeah, Trump is really a cult leader, and has all of these sycophantic followers in his cabinet. I don't know if you saw this recent cabinet meeting where everyone's saying how wonderful he is, and it reminds you of North Korea. And he's falling asleep during it, and just anyway. So sorry if I went on too long, but
no, there's no too long. So yeah. Okay. Yes. So, right. I remember years ago when I was studying in Boston and I wasn't getting anywhere on campus, going to the Hillel Rabbi and others and professors, because I was noticing all these front groups. And I called you and I said, let's hang out in Boston, where, you're in Massachusetts, and it was so nice to have you close by. Like, oh, Steve is here, right?
It was another era when colleges actually cared if cults were on campus recruiting their students to drop out. And the BU at that time, they no longer, for a long period of time, but they used to have me do orientations to resident advisors for freshmen, for transfer students, because it was a city university with massive numbers of students. And cults love to recruit young, idealistic people who are trying to figure out who they are.
it was very interesting. And you're right. And I remember this one dialogue, and then we'll move away from this because there's so much else to talk about. But, growing up, having this be sort of dinner table conversation, which might be odd, but we were also talking about refuseniks in Russia. We were talking about a lot of people all over the world who are needing freedom. That was sort of the theme, the sort of thread in our dinner table conversation in our home. And I was raised with a Rabbi Schulweis, who taught something called predicate theology, which is, and what are you going to do about it? Like here's the belief, but he would say, where's the therefore? So it's not here's the belief, period. It's here's what we care about. Here's what our conscience can care about, comma, and what are you going to do? So there was a lot of kind of activism, but responsiveness to noticing what was happening in the world. And it's hard because there's more to do than you can do. And that can be frustrating and it's hard to pick. But I feel like I really benefited from those kinds of conversations to learn to lean in, but you can exhaust yourself, as you know. But at the same
if
time,
if I could break in and just
yeah,
say,
please,
because you
please.
touched on refuseniks, and I just want to
Yeah.
state, because I'm getting a lot of people saying, how come you don't talk about left-wing cults, Steve? You're always talking about MAGA. And I'm like, communism is a cult. China is a mind control cult, and they're the biggest one, and they want to take over the world, etc. And the other thing I want to say, being a fellow Jew, is we believe in tikkun olam, that our job is to help repair the world. So when people say, why do you do this for so long? It's like, because I can, because I have a unique body of knowledge and experience that is
Right.
unmatched by a lot of people who are, in the field. And my brain's still working, and I have a passion for helping people and trying to shed some light on this darkness that is spread over the world. So thanks for letting me break in and add those two pieces.
Of course. And I just remember this very weird moment on the campus, and then we'll move we'll move more towards present time, where I noticed buses picking students up from the big dormitory at Boston University. And I walked up to people and I said, "Where are y'all going?" "Oh, we're going to a retreat." And I said, "But where are you going?" "We're going to the mountains." "Okay, still. But where are you, and who are you going with?" "It's a church." "What church?" "It's a church on campus." There was no information.
Right.
And there was no, and we're going, this is before cell phones too. So they're going to go up to the mountains. What mountains? And how are you going to get back? And who are these people? And are you going to come back? And there weren't questions
Right.
that they were asking because it wasn't important. You were just supposed to be a part of this sort of excitement, and they're already singing on the bus and getting people riled up. And I thought the lack of detail here that is all about safety was kind of shocking, that people were just filing onto this bus. It felt like a lemming sort of progression, and I thought, "Ooh, no." And it was chilling when you come from that perspective of cults, you know?
Yeah, and you don't know what you don't know. And most people, as you know so well, Rachel, walk around thinking they're invulnerable, and only weak, stupid, uneducated people can ever fall for a cult. Not understanding, cults don't say, "Hi, we want to abuse you and take over your mind and get your money and make you a slave." No, women lied to me and flirted with me, and I asked if they were part of a religious group. I remember asking in 1974, and just to date me, I'm an old fogey. I was recruited the same month Patty Hearst was physically abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army in San Francisco. There I am at Queens College in New York, getting recruited into a right-wing fascist cult, which is still around. people go, you don't hear about them anymore. I'm like, that's because they have a lot of power and they're in bed with the administration. But here's another factoid. I don't know if you know, Rachel, but I interviewed an author of a book on climate science denial called The Parrot and the Igloo. A man's name is David Lipsky. And I interviewed him because I saw a piece he wrote in Rolling Stone about how the Moonies were the major propagandists for climate science denial for 50 years. And this is my former cult. And the Washington Times Foundation. Yeah, I know them. They're still around doing propaganda. And they don't know that the Sons of Moon have an AR-15 gun cult in Pennsylvania and a gun factory, and are in bed with Michael Flynn, going around the country recruiting militia, sending them to training compounds in Tennessee and near Waco, Texas, for the civil war that they're planning to wage in the United States. This is my former cult that I was in the room, Rachel. One last rant about the Moonies.
No, please.
I was in the room with Sun Myung Moon in 1974 when he said, we're going to infiltrate the government. God thinks democracy is satanic. We need a theocracy. And when we take power in America, we'll amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who violate our rules. And we'll be doing them a favor by taking their bodies away and sending them to the spirit world where we can save them later. And Brainwashed Steve was like, yes, Father, great idea. But what's happened now with Trump is I was there 52 years ago hearing the plans, and the Moonies are in bed with the cult of Trump to this day.
Incredible. When we hear, and by the way, with the whole, AR-57, if anyone is thinking this is a paranoid thought, just go on the internet and
rodofironministries.org.
And it's a little slightly disconcerting seeing people there in this service holding these huge weapons. So go ahead, check it out.
No, people are like, are you making this up, Steve? And it's like, I'm a forensic expert.
Right.
Being honest and saying things that are proven true is really important to me.
Really important, right? And how many times do either of us say, I wish I were kidding. I wish, right? Please, I wish. So, like when people come on and they talk about the 7 Mountain Mandate and they talk about Project 2025, and they're like, this was in the works for a long time and under radar. And it really is amazing how much it's encroached and we don't know. Yes. So there was this briefing the other day, and I remember posting something about it where I said, what a narcissist does, or a malignant narcissist does, is that they'll just spout whatever kind of they want. If someone disagrees with them, then they play the victim, and then they go back to being grandiose and back and forth. And so I said, like, they would say something like, and I quoted what Trump actually said. I sort of quoted him. And then he said, and people will disagree with me, not because I'm wrong. People will disagree with me because they like to disagree with me. That was his reasoning. And that's the sort of the victim, like I'm the victim here. And then back to the grandiosity, but I'm never wrong. And it was like he had it all shored up, like tied up in a bow, in a sort of ego bow. And I thought that is fascinating to just watch it happen in real time right in front of you. And I think people don't know what they're seeing. And so your book has, I think, been illuminating so they can see the personality that we're dealing with and what that means too, and how to assess what's happening right in front of us. And maybe also in some ways to have a crystal ball, like this is where this goes, which is really, really important. I mean, your book has been so important, I think, to teach people about this personality. But also, I wanted to talk to you about the idea of loyalty, because I know it's something that you touch on. And I'm wondering from your perspective, and it might be hard to say because a lot of people are praising him, I think, out of fear, because they know what happens if they don't. But I wonder how many people really you think have a loyalty to him and to his message, or just fear him.
We're recording this the beginning of December, and it's, I guess, 2 weeks since Marjorie Taylor Greene said you really need to release the files, and he called her a traitor, and she then resigned after her pension will click in January. And then, because there was such a blowback, because so many people got into QAnon because they believed the lies about the trafficking ring run by the Democrats, with Hillary Clinton and children in the basement of the, Comet Pizza and all that. So many people got into the cult of Trump believing that he was going to drain the swamp and expose all the Democratic traffickers. And there she is going, we should listen to the trafficking victims, and this is what you promised. And then, of course, he said, yeah, we're going to release the files. And he told all the GOP to do it. What I say now, Rachel, is anyone who is still saying that Trump won the 2020 election and it was stolen is in the cult of Trump. And the question of whether they actually believe that or they're just saying it, whether they're paid off or whether they're being blackmailed or because they're afraid that people will turn on them and dox them and threaten them, I don't know. But I can tell you the temperature has really changed in the country. And I'm more optimistic in the last 2 weeks than I have been for a long time, despite the murders in the Caribbean, despite his calling Senator Mark Kelly a traitor for saying that only the military should only follow lawful orders. Because the thing about us as Americans is we were raised on this belief and this creed that we believe in justice and freedom and, the Statute of Liberty. And our ancestors came over here, and he's trying to turn it into a white Christian nationalist thing. And just the DNA of Americans, especially the people who've served and people currently in the military, if he tells them to fire on peaceful Americans protesting because they're told to, I think there's going to be a riot. I think there's going to be a rebellion. And my hope is there'll be a rebellion, frankly. This will get me into a lot of trouble with them. But I hope that they do a citizen's arrest and take in all the GOP people who are still backing this coup by Russia. And I just need to say it. I wrote it 6 years ago, top of chapter 7 on the Puppet Masters. Russia recruited Donald Trump as an asset in 1987, maybe earlier with Ivana. But for sure, when he did his first trip to Moscow, he came back to America and took out a full-page ad in the New York Times saying NATO should be disbanded. What happened that he's doing Putin propaganda? I should say Soviet Union propaganda. This was before Putin, right? And I interviewed Yuri Shvets, former KGB official who was the main source for Craig Unger's book, American Compromat. And Yuri said on a 2-parter interview I did, he said, I was much higher up in the KGB than Vladimir was. And it was standard operating procedure to recruit Western businessmen. We would invite them to our country, and we would set them up with beautiful Russian women, and we would videotape them and find out how to manipulate them. And he went on and on and on. He talked about a place in New York that was a front for the KGB, etc. This is not rocket science. Like, open your eyes, look at what's happening with Ukraine. Remember back to Helsinki when he said, I trust Vladimir and not the CIA and Homeland Security. Remember that, everybody? So I'm ranting, but it's because I'm excited, because people are starting to go, oh, yeah, I remember Helsinki. That was weird. And you start realizing he's been doing it in plain sight in many ways. And then I'll add in his favorite story is the story of the snake. Rachel, did you ever hear Trump read his favorite story about the snake?
No. What is the snake story?
The snake story is a story, I'm going to summarize it, but the snake needs to get across a river and makes a deal, I forget, with the goat or some creature. And the goat brings the snake safely over and then bites the goat and kills it. And as the goat's dying, but I helped you. Why did you do this? It's my nature.
Oh.
That's his favorite story. If you haven't heard, you should Google Donald Trump's favorite story, The Snake, and listen to him tell it. It's like, and people are Christians and you're following a snake.
Right. And so when he tells it, when you said you should sort of watch him tell it, what are you noticing when he tells the story? Sort of
He's a
just
malignant narcissist. My book, I went and told the story of the 50-year project to take down the U.S. So it didn't start with Trump, but I went into how he was raised in the cult of Norman Vincent Peale and positive thinking, and that if you believe it 100%, it's God's will if it happens, and if you doubt, it's a sin. So this notion of thought stopping, he was raised with this, with a insecure attachment, authoritarian father who was a racist, etc. And I compare him with Jim Jones and Moon and Hubbard of Scientology in chapter 3. But the point is that this gives a framework for people to go, oh, all this confusing overload of information where there's so many things happening, we can't process it. This is a technique of brainwashing. Overloading the mind is a standard brainwashing technique, but the Soviet Union and the billionaires of the tech bros are conspiring to use our data, our American citizens' data, to use supercomputers and AIs to make us more extreme, either more extreme on the left or the right, or to give up, to feel hopeless and helpless and lonely and anxious. And it's like I'm trying to say, we're in World War III. It's psychological warfare. We can beat this, but it starts with understanding what's happening. Who are the bad actors? What are the methods? What do we do to protect ourselves and our loved ones? And reaching out in real life to anyone we know who was believing in Trump and the whole MAGA movement, because I'm telling you, there have so many doubts from contradictions and how dysfunctional the whole thing is. And if you know the person before they got into the cult of Trump, you can identify which values to focus on, but ask questions in a curious, warm way. Don't attack. Don't try to use facts or logic. Just help me understand. Help me step into your shoes. What did you actually think when you heard Marjorie Taylor Greene read her story of why she's resigning? Oh, you haven't heard it? Can we listen to it together? I'm really interested, and you are really interested to see and watch this with them and get their reactions.
yeah. Your style, I mean, it's really the when I've worked with you and just knowing you, the way that you meld compassion and strategy, the strategy is for protection, but the compassion is you're a human being who was drawn to this for a lot of reasons, or you're not seeing what you need to be seeing. And let's look at that. Let's look at why, there have been blinders put on or you are kind of worried about seeing what is right in front of you and what that's about. I mean, I think it's a really really important balance when there's the humanity woven into these interactions. I mean, that's, I think, the only way to do it. When you were mentioning, I mean, his favorite story, the snake story, and I'm thinking we're so different. My favorite children's story is Ferdinand the Bull. So there we go. Like, when you think like, oh, okay, so if someone were to say to Trump, that's your favorite story, really? I mean, do you realize what that says about you? I don't think I think, he loves the power of it, and he loves associating with other people who are powerful. And I think that's the most
Well, he
important
was
trait.
trained, Rachel, by his father and Roy Cohn to think of things in terms of predator or prey. You're either eating or being eaten. That's his binary, all or nothing. So he always wants to be the predator. And that's why he identifies with the snake murdering the victim that he conned into helping him get across the river.
And that's why he kind of relates or crafts the world around him in this us versus them that you talk about in terms of cults. That's very interesting, right? The black and white. What is interesting, I mean, among a lot of other things, I talked to a woman, Olga Yurkova, who was helping to run something called stopfake.org in Ukraine. And this was right before the war. And she said, there's going to be a war because I can see what's happening. They've infiltrated our media. They're having us turn on each other. There's too much to deal with now, that there's this story, this fire to put out, that fire to put out. And it's also they can kind of be sneaking in under us, behind us. And so then a year later, she was needing to move out of her apartment because things were just exploding all around her, literally exploding. And it really is incredible to see how they operate. But that her organization was considered paranoid. Oh, you don't know. People were putting her down, just as I'm sure you're
Ad
having
hominem
to experience.
attacks, sure.
Right. Ad hominem attacks, which I know that you've had to deal with when you,
You
right?
think?
I mean, ad
I'm sorry for
nauseum,
laughing. No, you
right?
don't realize I'm a criminal, and I'm a religious bigot, and I kidnap and beat and torture and rape people. Like that. That's still on Scientology's website about yours truly.
Mm-hmm.
And the Scientology, just to rant for a minute about Scientology.
Go for it.
Donald Trump just pardoned this high-ranking whale of Scientology, David Gentili, who had I'm told by Jeffrey Augustine, who does the Scientology Money Project, that there was an 8-week jury trial. He was found guilty, sentenced to 7 years for defrauding like $1.6 billion, involved with the Russian mafia. And he just got pardoned by Trump after 7 days in jail. Oh, and Trish Duggan, another whale of Scientology, was appointed to the Kennedy Center Advisory Council. So we're looking at high-level cults in the cult of Trump. Opus Dei is behind Project 2025 of the Heritage Foundation, as well as the Federalist Society hacking of the Supreme Court. We have the Mormons, that people are like, don't talk about the Mormons. I'm like, I'm talking about the Mormons because they are deep into the cult of Trump. You can see it when Mitt Romney, the GOP presidential candidate, voted to impeach Trump in the first impeachment, and the church turned on Mitt Romney and treated him like a traitor as he voted his conscience on an impeachment thing. It's like Falun Gong is another cult that's in the cult of Trump. So people need to understand this is a conspiracy of authoritarians that want to bring down the United States of America because they have been the major reason why they haven't been taking over. And with the co-option of Trump and his government, Putin's now threatening to go to war with NATO. Like that's this week. He's now saying, You better shut up or else you're next. But that's what Hitler did, right? The appeasement never works with a dictator who's power mad, right? And that Putin wants to take over and get rid of NATO. It's a known thing. And so NATO countries who were depending on America for defense are now going, oh shit, what do we do now? I guess Germany should develop a military. Japan should develop a military. We're in a different phase of history. But we're kind of spoiled. We had 70 years of peace. We like rule of law and human rights and women's rights and gay rights and indigenous rights. We like, helping people who are poor and help feed them. And now we have these dictators saying, no, we can't afford it. The billionaires need more money. And we don't want regulation of AI or the social media. And they have their own agenda, network state. So they think they're going to be bigger than countries. And I say, Putin versus Musk. Who's going to win? I'm like, Putin's murdered people he doesn't want around. Has Musk actually murdered anybody, poisoned anyone, blown up a plane that somebody's in? Putin would do it in a second if Musk wasn't following online, or she. But for sure, Putin is a murderer and a war criminal.
So I'm wondering, to go over to another fun subject, Elattra. Let's talk about Elattra.
Yeah, please. So it's something that has come on my radar screen the last few years. And in particular, this year, I was shown a segment of an 8-hour propaganda video by a Russian agent, or a propagandist is probably more accurate, named Cholokian. It's largely an AI-generated 8-hour propaganda video, but in hour 5, yours truly, Steve Hassan, is named as the head of a global terrorist anti-cult network because I wrote The Cult of Trump.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
And this is a group that is a Russian cult. It was started in the area of Ukraine that Russia invaded, Crimea. And they have infiltrated the White House and the EU and the UN, and they have all these front groups and all these propagandists, and they sound great, Rachel, like women's rights, and we're worried about climate change, only there for oil, and they don't think there's human, raising of the temperature, right? But this is a cult I want people to know about, Allatra. And people need to understand, especially politicians, just because people want to give you awards and want to take your picture with great sounding things like we're against trafficking or we're for women's rights. Do some research on them. Like we're writing stuff and explaining stuff. Joe Zimhart is an expert on Agni Yoga and a lot of the occult beliefs of Blavatsky and such. That's at the undergirding of this international cult group. And guess what? The Messiah figure sounds like Vladimir Putin without being named for Allatra. So you may want to invite Joe Zimhart on to do it.
Yeah. Oh, he's a wealth of information.
Yeah, he's really bright. And because he was in Agni Yoga and Church Universal and Triumphant, he's uniquely qualified to talk about all of the occultic beliefs of QAnon and this particular Russian cult.
Right. Yeah, we had John Atack on talking about the connections, right?
Yeah, we just published my interview with John about his new book about Nazi occultism and Scientology. He's a walking encyclopedia.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's always working on sort of 3 or 4 other books while we're talking about this, and
He's a
I don't know.
genius. He just is. I count him as one of my closest friends and my confidant.
Lovely.
When I feel down, he's always encouraging,
Mm.
and I do the same for him.
It's good to have people in your life like that.
We feel like there's a small group of us, Rachel, where we're like, come on, we're David and there's this Goliath and we got a slingshot and we got some rocks. Maybe we need to think about how to get into position so we can do the shots that are going to matter. I'm trying to be strategic and do strategic messaging in a way that works. And in the end, people are going to get themselves out of mind control cults once they have frames to go. Because that's what helped me get out of the Moonies was Chinese communist brainwashing, Lifton's 8 criteria. It's like, wait a minute, we do all 8 of these, we the Moonies. But we're God and they're Satan. And it just created the dissonance that got my wheels starting to turn. Right? But then there's a tipping point where people are like, that's it, I'm done. Can't do this anymore. This is too bullshit. I want to go to sleep at night. I want to explain to my children what I'm doing and why. And that's what people need to be doing is targeting family and friends of GOP politicians and media people. And getting behind the public view to just say, come on, I know you're a good person. Like how can you think this is okay? Don't you think in the end history is going to judge you very harshly?
Right.
Like, don't you care?
Right. And so what I find, I mean, there's so many things that are interesting about this, but I find it really interesting that here we have like this group, Ellatra, saying that they care about women's rights and, whatever, global warming. When we talk about language, we talk about the need to sort of dissect language and what does that mean about women's rights. And in fact, it's interesting. There is a person who I talked to recently, a former member of a fundamentalist group. She got involved in this group because they said they cared about women's rights. Once she got more in, she realized the way they defined that was we believe in women's right to have the freedom to follow what God wants of them, right? So just don't take it at face value. See how they define, or we care about global warming. Yeah, we care about what, dispelling it or what. I don't know how they finish the sentence, but you want to be able to look behind all of these statements. But we don't do that. We're so happy to just see these phrases and think, oh, it aligns with how we feel and what matters to us. And I don't know if there are certain ways that people phrase things or organizations phrase things that can alert people to wanting to look behind it, or if you just need to do that across the board, no matter what.
Well, we're living in an age with AI that's generating such believable videos and audios of people saying and doing things that they've never said or done. That I do believe we're in a moment where we should assume a default position of I don't believe it until it's verified. That said, I want to speak about for a moment 4th generation psychological warfare, which I've interviewed the world's authority on that, James Scaminacci III, a few times. I quoted him in The Cult of Trump. But it was a systematic part of psychological warfare. And America and Michael Flynn used to do it on other countries before he became a traitor to Russia. But you attack experts, you attack science, and then you attack institutions. And, mental health experts like Bandy X. Lee, who edited The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, a New York Times bestselling book, with the first book had 27 top people, including Robert Lifton and Philip Zimbardo, saying Trump's dangerous. They got censored by the APA, by Big Pharma, saying it's the Goldwater rule. You can't diagnose a public figure. And she's like, I'm not diagnosing him. I'm an expert in dangerousness. And when someone says I could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and my followers will still follow me, you don't need to do a diagnosis. They are saying they're dangerous. They're just, you don't need to get them into your office and do a clinical diagnosis. But Bandy got the censorship where no one would have her on anymore, or me. I used to be on TV all the time, mainstream media. And we can't talk about the president being a cult leader. Or my publicist from Simon & Schuster, when the book first came out, I thought everyone in the world would interview me because they said they wanted to. Then it came out, and the publicist said, well, a friend of mine said if Steve Hassan wants to say the Attorney General of the United States, then William Barr, is a member of a cult and get on TV, he's got another thing coming.
Ooh.
And I wrote that he was on the board of directors of Opus Dei in Washington, D.C. He protected one of the worst double agents for Russia of the FBI, Hansen, who did so much damage to American intelligence. And he said, it had nothing to do with Opus Dei. Bullshit.
Wow.
Right? So
Right.
people need to understand these cults have infiltrated corporate media and they have agendas, and they're not going to promote things that are against their cult.
Right.
They just I got one more story on this one
Please.
you want to hear.
Yes, I do.
So I'm being interviewed for a documentary on Waco. And I'm in the green room waiting to be interviewed, and I meet the former FBI top negotiator that was talking to David Koresh. So we got to talking, and I said, I was trying. I asked my congressman. I said, they're doing it all wrong during the standoff. Let me advise you. I have the sister of the second in command calling me every day, wanting I can talk my brother into coming out. And the FBI said, we've got this covered. We're all set. So anyway, I'm talking with him. He later reads my books and he's like, you got to come to Quantico and teach your stuff to the FBI. And I'm like, okay, invite me. And then 3 months later, he said, I tried, Steve, but they don't want outsiders. Outsiders. I said, tell me more. Who did you ask? Oh, my former senior person, my buddy, who's a Mormon. And I went, oh, that explains it. And I recently, another connected tangent, I did 2 podcasts with a high-ranking 7th generation current Mormon and a defector who is training bishops, Jim Bennett and Ian Wilkes. And I asked them, I said, if you're in the FBI or you're in Homeland Security and you're a devout Mormon and you've sworn an allegiance to the Constitution, but you're also a devout Mormon, where would your allegiance lie if something came up like a cult expert who's going to be able to explain that the Mormons is a cult? He said, oh, the prophet, of course.
Wow. Okay.
And guess what religion is overrepresented in Homeland Security and FBI and CIA?
Oh, really?
The Mormons. The Mormons. Why? They don't drink. They don't smoke. They're sent to foreign lands, learning another language, and they're trained to be obedient to authority.
Wow.
Ideal for the agencies, but are they loyal to the Constitution or are they loyal to the prophet and the LDS Church? And I know this is very controversial because people know Mormons and they're so nice. And I say they're nice. I like a lot of Mormons. I like them.
Yeah. Oh, I know a lot.
I just want the group to change and not be an authoritarian mind control cult.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think to expand people's way of listening even to this interview, that to people are going to hear what you're not saying. And they're going to hear that you're saying something about every Mormon. And, right? I mean, people sort of globalize, generalize messages. And so I'm glad you said it shouldn't be necessary, but I'm glad you said, I know Mormons who are really nice. So do I. And who are really lovely people and ethical people. And we're talking about the organization and we're talking about how people are made to, I think, yeah.
The
Okay.
pyramid structure.
Right.
Most
Yeah.
people are at the bottom or are fringe members.
Yeah.
They're normal. They have their own
Yeah.
lives. They live separately, blah, blah, blah. I'm
Mhm.
talking about, like, study the 2-year mission commitment and how people have to be with another person 24/7 and how they can't, talk to their family, or it's very regulated. I know they're changing it because so many people are leaving Mormonism and are on social media messaging. The big cults, including Jehovah's Witnesses, which is a mind control cult too, they really had a problem when the internet came around and true believers started scanning all their original documents and putting them online and pointing out what you're teaching now isn't what's true of what actually was being taught. And true believers don't like to be lied to. They have really a hard time trusting authority when they realize the authority figure is a liar. That's what got me out of the Moonies and that this was the final straw that broke the programming. Was my ex Moonies handed me one of Moon's speeches to congressmen and senators, and it was published in a Mooney publication that I recognize. And they just handed me the document and said, just read this and tell us what you think, Steve. And Moon was saying to congressmen and senators, I'm so surprised that there's a controversy. People could actually believe that I, Reverend Moon, a Korean, could ever brainwash American people, because I respect American people. And I am so surprised at these accusations. And I'm reading this, Rachel, after nearly dying in a van crash in the hospital for 2 weeks and 5 days. I'm reading this, and for the first time in 2.5 years, I think, what a liar. What a liar. Because I was with him as he was berating Americans and saying how pathetic we are and how dirty our minds were and how we needed to be brainwashed because our minds were so dirty. And we were the archangel nation that had to be enslaved by the divine Adam. But once I said, what a liar, all of these buried memories started coming up of times where he told us leaders to lie to the members, much less the outside world. And I was like, well, if he's a liar, then he's not a man of God, because the divine principle teaches that God is a God of truth. And then I was like, well, then he can't be the Messiah. Then he's not trustworthy. And then I realized my entire belief system was based on this one false belief that he was the greatest man in human history and he was going to save the world and create the Garden of Eden. Once I took that one thing away, it felt like plop, 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 plop in my mind. Bing, 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 bing. The whole belief system went, and I just started crying. I just couldn't. What happened? What happened to me?
Right. But it takes a lot. I mean, it takes a lot of bravery to sit with that house of cards falling down around you. It is so disorienting, but it's so isolating. And what does this mean? And how do you deal with all of the feelings that are coming up? I mean, I talk to so many former members who deal with rage and betrayal and sadness and loss and so many huge feelings all at once, and they're not quite sure what to do with it all. It's really a very difficult thing, and I don't know how you made it through that.
I had a loving family, and that made a ton of difference. And my next door neighbor, my oldest friend, Monica, I tell this story regularly because I had other friends who were like, I told you it was a cult. You didn't listen to me. And other kinds of shaming and guilt tripping me. But Monica came with chocolate chip cookies she baked and said, welcome home.
Oh,
Still
oh,
brings tears to my
right?
eyes,
Oh, I know. I just got teary too. That's a
you know?
beautiful thing.
But
Hmm.
the thing is, for me, initially, it was just a shame, embarrassment, confusion, and what the fuck am I gonna do now?
Right. What am I going to do now?
Like, I knew I couldn't go back. The bubble burst. I knew my intellect was like, even though I was a leader and I was promised to have my own country one day and have all this power and money and blah, 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 I was just like, but I also felt like I needed time to digest the experience, and I had this cast on my leg and such. The anger came later. I was like, they've messed with the wrong person. When the Congressional Subcommittee for Korean CIA activities in the United States wanted to interview me because the Moonies were part of this covert operations, I said, I don't want to be public because I think they're going to kill me. But I'll be happy to give you all my private speeches that I had collected from being a leader in the Moonies, and I'll answer all your questions. But it wasn't until after Jonestown that another layer peeled back for me, because I naively thought when the congressional investigation ended, they would end the Moonies. And the final report came out October 31st of 78, and November 18th, 18 days later, was Jonestown. And Robert Dole, Senator Dole at the time, said, I want you to come down to Washington and be part of a hearing on cults. And I said, absolutely. Went down with an ex-member of the People's Temple, and we get there, and the Moonies and Scientology are picketing Robert Dole, saying repeal the First Amendment, elect him president, etc. And I was taken off the agenda, and I'm like, what's going on here?
Wow.
Like,
Wow.
what's happening here? And frankly, the government has never been honest with the American public that brainwashing exists. There's never been an official saying, yup, we know how to hack the brain, the mind, and radicalize people. They've never been honest. I just recently dug up an old subcommittee after Jonestown happened, and there's a section on the brainwashing tactics of Jim Jones.
Really?
79.
Incredible.
In black and white in the a congressional report. But the public is still walking around confused, believing that it's not a thing. And people like me, people like you are like, it's a thing.
Oh,
We
yeah.
can testify.
Oh,
Bright,
yeah.
talented people from good families, they can have their minds hacked and they can have their memories altered and they can be hypnotized without realizing it, and they can be indoctrinated. It's a real thing.
I want to move to, I know we're almost done with our time, but I want to move to the people who have been targeted. But I just want to say, if people want to learn about how this happens, there's so many sources out there of information about this. And there's so many people who are quieted from being sources of information. I think about how many times you were invited and then disinvited, how many times a door was open and then shut right before you could enter and give testimony, or how much information, basically, it's an interesting thing, how much information we're not getting. It is really, really important for people to know that. And if people want to see how this happens, to read your books, to read Robert Cialdini about, influence, about persuasion, but also I love his book about persuasion, how people, right? How
I
they
recommend
get,
that one over the original because he adds the framing piece, and he now has 7 principles of persuasion, not 6.
right. How we're conditioned to be open to being persuaded. Fascinating. I love that perspective. So I just want to make sure, just to kind of honor the people right now who are out there afraid, who are being targeted, because I want to take the time for us to do that as part of Tikkun Olam, to show our support for the people who, where ICE agents are keeping them scared and at home or being deported. I think about how many parks here in LA were usually going to be full during July 4th, filled with picnics. People who were celebrating, they were empty. People were too afraid to come out. And now with what's happening with the Somalis. So let's talk a little bit about that and any other group that's targeted that we want to honor, really, in these times that we're talking to each other now.
Yeah, and I interviewed one other person I think you should interview. Her name is Evelyn Perez Verdia, I believe, and she is a Hispanic political consultant who said the Democrats failed miserably during this 2024 election, and so many Hispanics got hacked by the MAGA cult to vote for Trump, thinking that he was going to improve life and only go after criminals. And now they're waking up and realizing, and a lot of these people, by the way, are in these mega churches of New Apostolic Reformation cults. That's I didn't mention them as the biggest base of the cult of Trump, but you know them as shepherding discipleship-like structures with someone at the top who claims to be an apostle or a prophet who speaks to God, and God told them that Trump won the 2020 election, but they do the behavior information, thought, and emotional control. Anyway, the point is that Hispanics are now, because the Democrats failed to understand, if you say I'm progressive, they hear it, if they've escaped a left-wing dictatorship, as a dictatorship or a raised fist. They equate it with dictatorship, that the messaging should have been, we're for democracy. And in terms of the targeting of Hispanic and Black people, that's part of the authoritarian playbook, to scapegoat, pick on some population and demonize them and treat them as if they're all criminals. And it's gutting our economy. There's so many good people who are here legally, and there are some undocumented people who are on a path to citizenship, many who pay taxes. And he's terrorizing them. And that's why all Americans need to speak out against what's this policy of this cult of Trump is, terrorizing people and threatening people. And this latest comment about Somalis is disgusting. People who oppose the cult of Trump need to get smart about not amplifying propaganda, but messaging the message that they want to say. And when Trump got elected the first time, and they were hacked, the elections were hacked with the help of Facebook. We know this from a whistleblower, Sarah Wynne Williams, that Brad Pascal used data from Cambridge Analytica, and they were targeting millions of Americans to vote for Trump. And that's why the Russians and Trump was so surprised they won, because it was hacked. In any case, I went off on a tangent, forgive me. But the point is, the authoritarian playbook is predictable if you understand it. And we have to get our messaging together, because that 2016 election, Trump got $2 billion of free advertising by saying outrageous things. And the media stupidly were like, can you believe it? Trump said this. Can you believe it? Trump said that. Can you believe it? But they're doing Trump, 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 Trump into the brain. And what we now know from neuroscience is when repetition occurs in the brain starts accepting it as if it was a fact. And that's why it's so important that we use our cerebral cortexes when we're hearing something like that and cancel or cult of Trump, cult of Trump, cult of Trump, another cult of Trump, and X. And rather than saying, can you believe what Trump said about Somalis, say, I support Somalis. I know Somali people. They're wonderful people. We welcome them in our community. How tragic that they are being threatened by this bigot. That's fine. How bad that they're being threatened by this bigot in the White House. That's fine. Don't use the T word. By the way, Rachel, do you know what his real name is?
No, what is his real name?
So before he ever got the GOP election, John Oliver, one of my favorite comedians, did an episode, Make Donald Drumpf Again, saying that his Austrian immigrant family's real name is Drumpf, Drumpf.
Wow.
So I bought hats, Make Donald Drumpf Again. I actually have some videos, Make Donald Drumpf Again. Let's do you and me, let's put it out on social media, Make Donald Drumpf Again. And people are like, what are you talking about? It's like, that's his family name.
Interesting. Right.
Who would follow a Drumpf?
Who would follow Trump?
Seriously.
You know, right. It has a different kind of sound to it.
You think?
Right? But it really is about getting to his core. Who is he really? And I think people really just don't know. And I think, one of the things that is hard for me when I see this with people who are these cult leaders like the Moons and other people, there is this smugness. There is this calm. There's this sort of benign smile. There's this floating above. They don't get wrinkles. And I just, that bugs me because it's like whenever I do counseling, and I'm pointing to this couch because people come in here, I can sometimes tell that if it's a couple coming in, that one is a narcissist and the other is their emotional supply because the narcissist is calm, tan, because it's LA, and they're all together. The person they came in with, haggard, hasn't had breakfast, didn't have time to brush their hair, so I feel like they leave people in their wake, but they just keep gliding through. I see that with the VP. They're very calm and smug because I think they feel like they have it all shored up and they have all these people working for their agenda and they know where it's going to go because that's where it's gone so far. And that if they're above reproach over and over again, it just builds more and more of a monster. And, if you're impeached, but it doesn't matter, then what does that do to someone's ego and how impervious do they start to feel and how untouchable do they start to act? And that bothers me. Yeah.
Well, and Trump literally was raised in a cult that taught him thought stopping. So, you don't allow negative thoughts about yourself in your head. Keep repeating, I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm great, I'm wonderful. Then you block any. People think I'm a schmuck. People think I'm an asshole, which is what really people are thinking. Or to quote Robert Bolton, one of his advisors, the guy's a moron. The guy's the most uneducated person I've ever met. He never reads books. He has no interest in learning and thinks he knows more than everyone else.
He knows more. And going back to the quotes from his briefing, just spouting facts and figures. And that if people want to correct me, it's because they like to correct me. I'm wondering when we finish off these episodes, what is helpful for the listeners often is the therefore. And now what can be done? What is going to be important for people to be able to do. I mean, I want people to feel hopeful or empowered, directed. This is not to dump and have people wring their hands, So what are the next steps? What do you think would be good?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And it's always a pleasure to connect with you. It brings out really happy neurons in my brain and in my heart. And I just want to do a shout out because you were saying when I first got out how hard it was. It was really frickin' hard. And Bill and Lorna Goldberg, who were there for me, Lorna's brother was in the Moonies, and they were just like so kind and caring and encouraging me. So I want to do a shout out for that. Listen, the human spirit is strong and resilient, but we're embodied minds, which means that we have to remember that we're not androids. Our brains are not evolved to be online 12 hours a day. But we need to have human connection. We should hug people in real life and look people in the eyes and not just on pixels, even though I'm grateful with the distance between us that we can connect today. But I really believe in a gratefulness practice. And people ask me, how could you do what you've been doing for so long? It's like, because I could have died in that van crash and I didn't. So every day I'm grateful for another day. I'm grateful that I can walk around. I'm grateful that I have people who are my friends and my family. And that speaks to what we need to be doing is creating trust pods of people in our lives so we don't feel isolated. So if we see a video or something that sounds too good to be true, but we want to do it, we go to our trust pod and say, I'm thinking of doing X or buying this product or whatever. What do you think? And in a pod, you can actually take turns being the contrarian. So someone has the role of being the devil's advocate of why you shouldn't do it, why you shouldn't, be with that person or buy that product or go on that workshop retreat or whatever. But just understand our mind is precious and we want to exercise our brains and realize that there are bad actors who want to subvert our unique individuality, our own sense of identity and our conscience, and that it's up to us to go, no, no. It would be nice to have $1 million, but no, I'm not selling my soul for $1 million or any amount of money because I want to look at in the mirror before I go to sleep and feel good about myself. I want to like myself and trust myself. And we're not alone. There's way more of us than in the cult. And just remember with the pyramid, there's just a few people, bad people who are running this. The rest are being entrained and indoctrinated to follow. We changed the leadership to ethical leadership. We can't go back anymore. We have to start thinking, how are we going to have planetary survival? How are we going to encourage the human spirit that wants to be free? China is deathly afraid of freedom, which is why Xi and Putin, but especially Xi, loves it when the media in America says, there was another mass shooting in, Stockton or this or that, because then they get to tell their people, see, we keep you safe. We don't allow people to have assault rifles to shoot people. See what happens in America? Because they want to program people not to come to America or to think that being free is a good idea. And what we need to say is that's abuse of freedom. That's not real freedom. That's a lack of regulations based on the common good. And there's no such thing as free speech. There's speech with responsibility. It's always been illegal to scream fire in a crowded theater if there isn't a fire. It's called a lie. And America needs to start, and I have my influence continuum to plug people. Go to Freedom of Mind. You can download it for free. It's now in Spanish and French in addition to English. Study it and share it. Give it to your therapist. Give it to your doctor. Put it on the wall. Sit down with your kids and explain. Respect for individuality or conscience, informed consent, healthy leadership that acknowledges faults, that's psychologically healthy versus the authoritarian, destructive, malignant narcissist stuff. Because once we understand a framework for how to proceed, we can work together and get rid of this infestation of bad actors who want to destroy our way of life. And I love being free, and I want to keep using my voice. And I appreciate your work, Rachel, for having former members on, by covering these topics, by having the courage to have me on to talk about the cult of Trump and Russia, etc. Because there's a lot of other podcasters that are like, nope, we can't go there. And that's self-censorship.
Right, which I don't want to buy into. And it shouldn't take courage to tell the truth. And if it does take courage, and if you're putting yourself at risk by telling the truth, it says something about the system that I don't want to kowtow to. I don't want to have to buy into. You are a wonderful mix of bravery and compassion and research, intellect, but really diving in and making yourself available to people to really learn from. And I really, and for decades, have respected you and your work, and it's just really always fun to see you.
Oh, thank you so much, Rachel. Yeah. Are you on Substack? Because I've been doing a lot of writing and stuff on Substack now.
No, I need to do that.
That's where a lot of the media people who are resigning or being fired are going to have followings. I'm Steven Hassan on Substack. I'm doing my podcast, Cults, Culture, and Coercion. We rebranded it from the Influence Continuum. Thanks again, and please come on my podcast, and we'll do one soon. Thanks so much.
Of course. One more thing before you go. It is always so nice to talk to Steve. It is so reminiscent of so many wonderful moments of getting to know each other, and that he feels close to my family, and I've gotten to know his family. It's been really quite lovely. And he has been this source of information and also a real risk taker. He feels strongly about a lot of things and is not afraid to say it. And whether people agree with him or not, what seems to matter to him is that he wants to get the information that he feels is important to the public out to the public, and then take the risks that come with that. It is easy then, I think, to feel overwhelmed. And the fact that we can talk calmly and be laughing about different things and also sharing some really, really disturbing information says something about the need to strike a balance. And that's something that I want to make sure to talk to you about today, because hearing Steve talk about all that's happening and all that we need to be wary of and all that we need to be warned of and all that is existing that is happening under our noses can feel overwhelming. And we don't want to have each day feel like this sort of seismic shift where things are shifting under our feet. We want to feel like we're on solid ground as much as possible. With all of the changes happening in this world, it is easy then to just say, I'm out. I just can't. And if that is what your nervous system needs, that is really fine. But I also, and I want to support that, really, I do. But it's also, I think, important, if you can, to keep up on what is happening to whatever degree you can. And it's important to learn how to do that and how to do that in a way that is safer so that you can lean in to this kind of information without needing to lean away or be fearful of it. And be fearful not only of the information, but the impact that it's going to have on you. And again, everyone is different and everyone has different sorts of needs. But I know that it is very difficult, especially for people who were raised in certain environments where they had this vision of what the world was and whom to trust and whom not to trust. It was quite black and white. And a lot of people coming out of cultic groups being exposed to the news and what's really happening in the world feel very overwhelmed. So I want to be able to give you some guidance about how to avoid overwhelm while at the same time avoiding really too much avoidance, really keeping yourself not aware of what's happening, because I think it is good to know. I think it's good to know, and we can't know everything, and that's probably okay, because I think it would overwhelm our systems. It's like when I learn about the cosmos and I learn about stars and galaxies, and just the numbers are so staggering and all the different galaxies, it really can blow my mind. And what's happening on our planet Earth is already blowing my mind. So there's a lot that feels like it's too much for our systems and our brains to take in. When you are taking in information so that you can continue taking it in and hearing about the things that Steve talks about and writes about and does interviews about, it is good to have kind of a predictable window of information, meaning that you're going to give yourself an hour at a certain time of day. Maybe not the first thing in the morning. You want to start your day with other things on your mind. But maybe at some point during the day, that's when you check the news. Of course, there are going to be exceptions based on, how things are going in the world. And if there's a new news event that you want to make sure that you know about, of course, dive into that. But if you can say, okay, maybe after work, I'll spend an hour or two watching what's happening, reading what's happening, and then I'm going to move on. And then I'm going to switch to either turning it off, shutting down my phone, making sure that I'm not getting alerts that are audible so it doesn't sort of ping me throughout my life and get me back focused on things that are stressful. This can prevent kind of chronic activation. And it can also let the body anticipate when the intensity is going to arrive because you've planned for that. And so this is the time to kind of fasten your seatbelt and just take it in. And the next thing I think is important really is, of course, to curate your sources very carefully. We are so focused on what comes into our news feed, but we don't know how accurate it is. And we don't know why it is that this came to us and through what algorithm and what the intention is. Are they trying to get us worked up? Are they trying to convince us of something? So you want to go to news sources that have this nice way of looking at things in a more kind of even-handed way, like the app Ground News and other sources like it, but sources whom you trust, people like Steve Hassan. There are also important things to do where if you notice that you read a headline and you get very upset and you're not in the right frame of mind to dig into that article or watch that video, then don't. There will be time to do it. And you want to make sure that you're not just going into overwhelm over and over, because again, then you will go into avoidance of information that I think is sometimes helpful to know about. You want to also do some nervous system regulation. Take some deep breaths. Know that still within your world, if it is true, you are safe and everything's okay. And you can still go about your business and still make the dinner that you were expecting to make, or have your job that you go to, or your friend who you can talk to, and all of those things remain the same. And so to remind yourself of what is static, what is good and predictable, and what is the same in your world, while you feel like other things are changing and changing at a very, very fast pace. There are also important things to remember that when we talked, and Steve and I talked about tikkun olam, this idea of repairing the world. It's Hebrew, to do something good for the world. Olam is the world. There is something important about doing, about being involved in your life, not just consuming information, but thinking, what can I do today that would actually feel good, that would help me know that I have some level of empowerment? Maybe you want to donate to a cause. Maybe you want to sign a petition. Maybe you want to send a supportive message to someone who might need it that day. You want to schedule some kind of civic task, like working at a food bank or passing out dinner for a certain holiday at a shelter, helping animals also in animal shelters. There are also important things to do where people feel good when they have helped protect themselves or help protect their family. If you want to update, if you have emergency preparedness and you want to update whatever you have for that. I know here in California, we think about that in terms of earthquakes and fires. And to the best of our ability, we try to make sure that we have flashlights with batteries that are good, and bottled water and other things that we need. And the feeling of doing that and knowing that you can be involved in those activities while, again, other things feel out of your reach, out of your hands, is a very important balance. It's also good to have some sort of containment after, like a closing ritual of sorts, where after you watch something or read something that is beyond disturbing and upsetting and makes you feel scared or makes you feel overwhelmed or very upset or powerless, you want to be able to do something like stepping outside and being in nature, or listen to a song that's uplifting, or again, calling a friend who's supportive or one who has a great sense of humor. Laughing is a good thing, but also to have your ritual be something that you can also use kind of a language, a mantra of sorts that helps create some emotional distance, like, I feel good that I'm learning about something that's happening in the world. Something like that. That's very neutralizing. Oh, good, I'm glad that I now know this information, and, let me find out also who's doing something about it. Sometimes people want to know that if you can't affect some sort of governmental change, let's say, you want to know who is. You want to know who cares. You want to know who's setting up some sort of commission about something or raising money for a particular cause. And so I think it is good, while you're busy accessing all of this, to remind yourself too that you have permission to not know everything, and there really is no way to know everything, and that that's okay. And what you then want to do is you want to focus on the things that are known, the things, again, that are grounding, the things that are true in your life, the things that make you happy, the things that you need to work on that are very able to be done, like, I don't know, fixing your mailbox that's fallen over, or whatever else. Making sure that you take care of things that you need to take care of so that you feel like you have some semblance of control while other things feel outside your control. There are a lot of techniques for this, and if you have others that you use, please share them with us here at the podcast. We'd love to hear them. So, thank you again to Steve, and thank you for the education that he's doing. Thank you for the risks that he's taking. It doesn't always get appreciated, because the things that you usually hear when you put yourself out there is the criticism or the hate or the threats. But we fully appreciate you, Steve, and again, all that you do for the public and for education and for opening people's eyes. Take good care. Talk to you next week.
Thank you very much for listening. Please support IndoctriNation on Patreon at patreon.com/indoctrination. Be sure to give us a follow on our social media. Find us on Facebook and Instagram using @IndoctrinationPodcast. And for Twitter, find us at _indoctrination. We love hearing from you too. So send us an email at indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. And for more updates on the show, visit our website at www.podpage.com/indoctrination.